Who are the top 10 players in the world overall? I'm going to complete my player power ranking series by crowning an overall top 10, which honestly I'm wincing as I say that because it's really hard. I've gone back and forward on so many positions, but I'm sticking where I am right now, and I'll get to that in just a minute. If you appreciate the content on the channel, please do hit subscribe. I would love it if you do. I'm so grateful that you watched this video and all the videos. I've been trying to fill this little gap over the last couple of weeks where there is no rugby happening. So something for us to keep the momentum going until the Rugby Championship is back. And yeah, happy Rugby Championship Eve. Enjoy the rugby when it's back tomorrow. In the meantime, yeah, I hope you've enjoyed the player power ranking series, ranking each position, top 10 players. And I thought I'd just take a second before I get into the top 10 players overall to reflect a little bit on that. And if I get myself out of the way, you can have a look at. Those are the players that came in first place in their position and all on the same field. That would be a dream team. And it really would, wouldn't it? How good is that? What a side. 7 South Africans, 3 Frenchmen, 3 Irishmen, a New Zealander and a Fijian. Overall, box office side. Now, what I also did was take the top player in their position from the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere. And I was kind of thinking, imagine if rugby did like a state of origin style Northern Hemisphere versus Southern Hemisphere matchup. Do that. If they did that in play the games in Qatar or whatever, forget about the Nations Championship. Why don't we have that? 3-match series. Get a couple of legends coaching it. Former players, legends coaching and managing each team, and just have that. It would be awesome. And yeah, I don't know which team would win. I know I would love to see that game. But one interesting thing is that there are 10 South Africans in the Southern Hemisphere team, 10 Irishmen in the Northern Hemisphere team. Those have been the 2 best teams in the world over recent years in terms of the rankings. And it did make me wonder how much of it is that a great team is made because you have really good individuals, which is why there are so many on the list. And how much of it is it that you have so many South Africans and Irishmen on the lists because the teams are really good. And quite often a good team will make individuals look better. Maybe a bit of that going on as well. Your thoughts? Here's also a score. If you gave everyone that came top of their category 10 down to everyone that came 10th in their category 1 point, what would it look like? And it looks like that. South Africa out ahead with Ireland, France in hot pursuit, New Zealand, then Scotland, England, and so on. And it does track really well, pretty much with world rankings. I do think there's probably a lag in my player power rankings because I take into account historic form, a whole player's body of work. I take that into account, and there's probably a bit of a lag therefore as their true score right now, snapshot in the world, comes through. So as a result, England are on the rise a bit after the Eddie Jones era, so they'll start going up in the player power ranking. Same with New Zealand now that Scott Robertson's in charge. It'll be interesting to track. But to my top 10 then, and as I say, really hard to do, but I've done it. And your thoughts? Do you agree? This is the youngest player on the list at 10, Dan Sheehan. Dynamite player, so good, and a lot of rugby ahead of him, only 25. I think he's almost the heir to the Dane Coles thrown at hooker. And by that I mean, do you remember Dane Coles, maybe 10 years ago, completely changed the way hookers played, just changed the game. So you'd see him popping up in those wide channels, gassing it in those 15-metre tram lines and running like an outside centre. Dan Sheehan does a bit of that for Ireland and Leinster. You often see him out wide and he's got the athleticism, the skill, the speed to do that. But what I like about how Dan Sheehan is also built on that is he does the tough stuff in the middle of the park as well. So he's a proper all-rounder, is Dan Sheehan. Ahead of him in 9th, the best hooker on the planet, in my opinion, Malcolm Marx will have something to say about that. And if he gets back and fit and plays, Malcolm Marx will be challenging again. But Piato Malvaca has had an unbelievable couple of years. He's been so good. For France, for Toulouse, he's massive. And he's deceptively big because he's so mobile. You don't think he's as massive as he is. 124 kilos. That's, if you're from the UK, that's 19.5 stone. Massive. He's got that Pacific Island physique. He's from New Caledonia, which is a French colony in between. In fact, if you drew a straight line from Brisbane on the east coast of Australia to Fiji, New Caledonia's slap bang in the middle there. So that's where he was born and raised. But honestly, he's some player, is Piato Malvaca. Number 8, Tadhg Beirne. Unicorn of a rugby player. He can do it all. His breakdown work, turnovers, is better than most open side flankers. His line-out, attack and defence is world-class. His maul defence. He's got a great running game and offloads. I think what marks out Tadhg Beirne more than anyone else, I think he's got the biggest engine in world rugby. He just never, ever stops. And that's body. He's physically got a massive capacity, but it's mind as well. He's so mentally tough. There are bigger players that he manages to match up with. And yeah, he has been a huge part of why Ireland have been operating at such a high level for so long. His kicking game is brilliant as well. Tadhg Beirne, he'd be starting for the British and Irish Lions for me next summer. Surely he will be. Number 7, Cheslin Kolbe. Talk about guys with massive hearts. Cheslin Kolbe probably got the biggest heart in world rugby and the best power to weight ratio of any player on the planet. A little pocket rocket, Power Ranger. Like, defensively, that comes through. The power and the heart of the man comes through defensively. I mean, he can bust through tackles. So explosive, but he never gets... He always stops much, much bigger men. And he's done it on the biggest of stages. And as well as his stepping, attacking play, huge defence, just a lovely human being. That image of him with his head inside his shirt after getting a yellow card will go down in rugby folklore. And I have been fortunate enough to interview him a couple of times in some man of the match interviews, and just an absolutely exemplary human being, first and foremost. Amazing rugby player. He's at number 7. And I went back and forth so much between number 7 and number 6. Could have gone either way. I reckon that between the two of them, between Cheslin Kolbe and Damien Penaud, if you put them together, you've got the ultimate winger. Cheslin Kolbe, incredible defensively, very good in attack as well. Damien Penaud, his attack is mind-blowing. His highlights reel is insane. And look at that try-scoring record. In 53 international tests, he scored 36 tries. That is phenomenal. He is only 2 tries behind Serge Blanco, the all-time record for tries for France. He's going to get that record this year probably, if he stays fit. And he's only 27. I think what's so impressive about Damien Penaud... I'll tell you what, I'll give you a stat about Damien Penaud. I thought this was amazing. A tackle evasion statistic. So of every person that tries to attempt to tackle, how many of them does the player manage to evade? And the top 3 tackle evasion statistics for 2023, Will Jordan, 34% tackle evasion, number 3. Number 2, it was Tabut Sadza, the Georgian winger, awesome player, 57% tackle evasion. So he gets out, he makes people miss more than half of the time. Damien Penaud, tackle evasion for 2023, 75%. 3/4 of every tackle that is attempted on him, they don't manage to make land. That is how good he is. He's my number 6. My number 5 is Caelan Doris. And I'll just say it now. Give the guy the British and Irish Lions captaincy. He's... Just thinking of the list. Yeah, he's the best. There we go. I've got it. He's the best player in the British Isles and Ireland combined. He's the best player. And he's one of the few players who's guaranteed his spot next summer if fit, because he is just world class. What I love about Caelan Doris is he's got an amazing rugby brain. He just pops up in the right place at the right time. His support lines, his reading of the game, his intelligence, when to give an offload, when not to, when to step in and make a tackle, when not to. It's just on another level. But what he's really developed and really shown in the last year or so is proper hardness. There were times I was out there in South Africa watching. It was that game in Durban, and he set the tone at the very start of that match as captain, by the way, for Ireland in that game. And he set the tone by just running. I remember there was one where he sort of 20-metre run up and just ran at, I think it might have been Eben Etzebeth and Peter Steph Toy between them, and he just took it and made yards. He's added that hardness to his game. Caelan Doris is number 5. Ardie Savea, current World Player of the Year, number 4. Talk about leg drive through contact. Is there anybody better in world rugby than this guy? Is there anyone that would be more horrible to tackle than this guy? He's all elbows and knees. Ardie Savea is violent in the best possible way. He is a brutal rugby player, so explosive, such a baller, and he does all of that horrible stuff with a massive grin on his face, which just kind of makes you love him even more. Current World Player of the Year, and if he carries on the way he's playing, could well get that award again for 2024. Number 3. Godlike figure of Pieter-Steph du Toit. I flipped between number 2 and number 3, back and forth, back and forth. I'm just going to stick where it is. Pieter-Steph du Toit, a god among men. He may well be remembered more than anything for that World Cup final last October. On the greatest stage with the best players on the planet around, when the stakes are as high as they can be, and without saying a word, but just following through with actions, not words, Pieter-Steph du Toit went on a one-man wrecking mission to bust the New Zealand attack to pieces, and fair play for Geordie Barrett, keep getting up every time he got smashed. South Africa do not win that World Cup final without this guy. On that stage, to be that much better than any other player on the pitch, that's greatness. That is true greatness, and just a warrior. And his story with the fact that he could have had his leg amputated and skin grafted and all the rest of it, just adds to the myth and adds to the legend of PSDT, who gives every other player PTSD. Number 2, his countryman Eben Etzebeth. Talk about warrior. This guy's already the greatest player in his position of the modern era, the professional era. Probably by the end of his career will go down as the greatest player in his position of all time. I don't think that's over egging the pudding. The guy's got 122 caps to his name already. The durability and the consistency of performance is so high. Like a poor day for Eben Etzebeth is a 8 out of 10. He is so consistently good. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, how much would you love to have him on your team? I wonder if in the back of his mind he's eyeing up Sam Whitelock's all-time cap record. He's 33. If my stats are right, I think they're right, by the way. I've got them all from one website, but I hope they're correct. 122 tests. But that would make him 32 caps behind Sam Whitelock, or thereabouts. If that's the case, by the next World Cup, if he stays fit, touch wood, as well as getting a 3rd World Cup, he could well have that record to his name. We wouldn't put it past him. An amazing player. Generational talent. Number 1, Antoine Dupont. Do you know what? There was that kind of silly conversation that started a couple of weeks ago when he won the Olympic gold, when people started saying, is he the greatest of all time? I mean, fun conversation to have. Kind of meaningless, because it's hard to compare a scrum half from a winger to a tight head prop, let alone a scrum half from 2024 to a scrum half from 1964. It's almost impossible to compare. But here's a stat for you, which I think does just give a hint to the greatness that Antoine Dupont is getting towards. So he has been nominated for World Player of the Year 3 times and won it once in 2021. He's the only rugby player in the history of the sport, or certainly in the history of that award, to have got 3 nominations in 3 consecutive years. No other players managed that. Not Richie McCaw, not Dan Carter, no one else. He's the only player that's managed it. Now, what's amazing about that is that nowadays there are only 3 people that get nominated for the award. There's the winner and 2 nominees. Whereas in years gone by, when Dan Carter and Richie McCaw were getting nominated, there would be 6 or 7 players on the list. So he's been nominated. He's the only player to be nominated 3 times in 3 years, in a time when there's only 3 names that get nominated. That is incredible in and of itself. But here's another stat. I looked into this. By the age of 27, the age Antoine Dupont is now, Richie McCaw and Dan Carter, 2 of the players that in that GOAT debate got said he can't hold a candle to the 2 of them. True now. But at the age of 27, Richie McCaw and Dan Carter had won 1 World Player of the Year and been nominated another 2 times. They had exactly the same record at the same age as Antoine Dupont. Personally, I don't subscribe to the whole you have to have won a World Cup to be considered the greatest, because that doesn't take into account the country you're from or the context around and all the rest of it. But I'm not saying he's the GOAT or even going to be the GOAT. But I'm saying that if you actually look back at the same point in Richie McCaw and Dan Carter's career, he's tracking the same. And all I do know for absolute certainty is that of every player I've ever been fortunate enough to see play live in the stadium, and there's a lot of great players that I haven't seen play live, but of everyone that I have seen play live, his greatness comes through, and he's the best player that I've ever watched. There's a lot of players I haven't watched, but of the ones I have, comfortably the best. And right now, in my opinion, the best player on earth. Tell me what you think. Really hard list to come up with. Just a bit of fun anyway. It doesn't really matter. No player's going to be offended by the fact they're in one position or another or not on the list or whatever. But just a bit of fun. But let me know what you think. I'm pretty happy with the top 4. I could have changed Etzebeth and Peter Steph around, but pretty happy with the top 4. Positions 5 to 10. I basically put them in any order you like, and I'll just go, yeah, fine. I'm happy with that. They're all amazing players. That's all that really matters. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. Look, the rugby's back tomorrow. I'll have videos coming after the Rugby Championship games, and so you don't miss any of those. And if you appreciate the content on the channel, hit that subscribe button, thumbs up, and tell me what you think down below. I'll see you on the next one.